Tonight, the annexation threat towards Canada days before the Prime Minister heads to the White House.
You don't even realize what a beautiful country it would be. It would be great.
And what he's willing to do to make it happen.
Would you rule out military force to take Canada?
Plus, the Trump factor that sparked a Canadian-style election comeback for another world leader. 80 years after liberation, how the Dutch honored our country's war heroes.
Dave is still right to me after all this time.
Anticipation builds ahead of the papal conclave.
Canada has never had 4 electors. It is quite a significant number.
Plus, the tech whiz making waves in the world of AI.
Ideas are everywhere. You pick something, you find something that's interesting, and you start building and launching.
The hacker taking his talents to new heights.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. The U.S. president is tonight defending his tariff policies and repeating his desire to make Canada the 51st state. It comes just as Prime Minister Carney prepares to meet with Donald Trump at the White House on Tuesday. CTV's Jeremie Charron on the renewed threat and some advice on how to deal with it.
Or next week.
So will you talk to him about making Canada a 51st state, annexing Canada?
I'll always talk about that.
Just days before a highly anticipated meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Carney, Trump repeated his threats to annex Canada in an interview with NBC's Meet the Press.
I don't think the American public wants me to pay $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. Again, remember this.
Yeah.
We don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We don't need anything.
But he held back when asked about using military force.
Would you rule out military force to take Canada?
Well, I think we're not going to ever get to that point.
Already this year, Trump has had multiple televised Oval Office press conferences with world leaders, most notably a high-tension meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
In his first press conference as Prime Minister Friday, Carney had this to say when asked how he'd avoid an Oval Office ambush.
I go there with the expectation of constructive, difficult, but constructive discussions. That's the spirit of the conversations that the President and I had.
Experts say Tuesday's meeting could set the tone for the next 4 years.
The tone at the top is always important, and personal chemistry, if you can get it, is just absolutely spectacular.
Meanwhile, in an interview on CTV's Question Period with Vashi Kapelos, Democratic Governor of California Gavin Newsom had this advice for the new Prime Minister.
Come in with the points of pride, principle, with the authority, the moral and formal authority he has as Prime Minister of a remarkable nation, Canada, and assert yourself.
Prime Minister Carney is set to travel to Washington tomorrow and meet with Trump Tuesday.
The two leaders will discuss tariffs and Trump's trade war, but also the broader relationship. Both sides have expressed interest in negotiating a new trade and security relationship. Heather?
Jeremie Charron in Ottawa. Thank you. Donald Trump made a new tariff announcement tonight, this time on movies. The U.S. president says he will impose 100% tariffs on any films made outside the country, calling them a, quote, national security threat. No details yet on how it would be implemented or the potential impact on Canada. Meantime, Trump says he's going to reopen and expand Alcatraz for America's, quote, most ruthless and violent offenders. The notorious prison on an island off the coast of California has been closed for 60 years and operates as a tourist site. A wave of anti-Trump voters helped propel Australia's Prime Minister to a second term. The win for the Labour Party seemingly looked a lot like our own election. It was dominated by affordability issues. The American president and the opposition leader lost his seat. CTV's Colton Praill now on the Trump factor.
Worlds apart, but nearly identical situations.
The Australian people voted for unity rather than division.
This week, centre-left parties in Canada and Australia both won unexpected election results, thanks in large part to one man.
One factor I think we can all acknowledge and recognise is the Trump factor. It was devastating in Canada for the Conservatives.
Opposition Conservative leaders in both Canada and Australia ran campaigns that included promises targeting woke ideology and decreasing the federal public service. Both were ahead in the polls prior to the election call, but on voting day, lost the election and their seats.
Now, these were only faint echoes of what has happened in the United States, but Peter Dutton and his team found himself unable to break free of the association.
Experts say it's part of a political turn against the rise of populism that's accelerated since Donald Trump took office. The result, voters in Germany, Canada, and now Australia chose to elect more centrist governments.
Both were seen as sort of the safe option at a time when right populism was strongly associated with international instability.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is positioning that instability as an opportunity for Canada to strengthen relations with like-minded allies.
Canada has what the world needs, and we uphold the values the world respects.
Some of that work has already begun through visits to France and the United Kingdom, but those relations could grow even closer now.
It's increasingly obvious that standing up to Trump is in fact good domestic politics in a lot of the world.
In a congratulatory message on social media to Anothy Albanese, Carney said he looks forward to building on Canada and Australia's shared values. Heather.
CTV's Colton Praill reporting tonight from Ottawa. And in Romania, an admirer of Donald Trump appears to be on track to become president. Nationalist candidate George Simeon thanked supporters after exit polls showed a victory following the first round of the election. The 38-year-old who opposes military aid to neighboring Ukraine and is critical of the EU leadership goes into the runoff on May 18th as a clear favorite. Israel is vowing to retaliate against the Houthis after a missile strike near the country's main airport. Air raid sirens rang out, sending passengers scrambling for cover as a plume of smoke rose near a terminal. 8 mild injuries were reported. The Iran-backed Houthi rebels claim they acted in solidarity with the Palestinians on a day several Israeli airstrikes hit Gaza City. The end of the Second World War on the minds of many this weekend. In a somber ceremony today in the Netherlands, thousands honored the Canadian soldiers who gave their lives to free the Dutch. Sitting near the graves of the men they went to battle with, surviving veterans, accompanied by Canada's Governor General. As CTV's Andrew Johnson shows us, it's clear Holland hasn't forgotten their sacrifice.
Tony Pearson was overwhelmed when he saw how many people filed into the Holton Canadian War Cemetery to pay tribute to his old friends.
The numbers tell you everything.
The numbers, a crowd of 5,000 seated next to the graves of 1,350 Canadians killed in the final months of the Second World War as they liberated the Netherlands from 5 years of brutal Nazi occupation.
With the end of the war came relief for the liberated, but also the realization that liberation had come at a heavy, almost unthinkable cost.
Today, 80 years later, in front of Pearson and a handful of other Canadians who survived those battles, the Dutch held a solemn ceremony to acknowledge that sacrifice. 101-year-old Canadian veteran Nick Janicki read in Flanders Fields.
Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Field.
15,000 poppies were released from above as Dutch children placed 2 roses on each Canadian's grave. They were asked to say each soldier's name out loud so they will never be forgotten.
Lieutenant Martin was killed in action.
History students from 2 Ontario high schools honored 4 fallen soldiers from their region who are buried here, calling the experience eye-opening.
These soldiers were all around my age when they went off to fight, and I really can't imagine
imagine doing that myself. It's a lot.
Thank you very much. The Canadian guests of honor, the Liberators, making their final trip back to the place, and the people they're bonded with for life, say 80 years later, the Dutch haven't changed a bit.
Dave is still write to me after all this time. Write me letters and Christmas cards and stuff. So they're unbelievable.
It was really impressive.
In contrast to today's somber ceremony, tomorrow will be a day of celebration. Liberation Day will feature a freedom parade that starts in the square where the German army surrendered in front of a Canadian general in 1945. 90,000 people are expected. Heather?
Andrew Johnson for us in Apeldoorn, Netherlands. Here at home, there were ceremonies across the country to commemorate VE Day and the Battle of the Atlantic. CTV's Kathy Lee takes us there.
The deep, solemn tone echoes through the cold air in Calgary, each ring heavy with meaning. This role is one Andrew Kerr is deeply honored to fulfill.
To remember the loss of the ships and the sailors who served aboard those ships.
Those ships and vessels instrumental during the Battle of the Atlantic 80 years ago. On this poignant anniversary marking that significant conflict and the end of the Second World War, Canadians across the country honored those who fought valiantly.
There's guys that were here the last time that aren't here today, and so you reflect upon that and you try and remember those people that you sailed with.
The campaign was the longest and one of the deadliest, testing the very souls of those who served. More than 4,000 Canadians lost their lives, including members of the Royal Canadian Navy, the Merchant Navy, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Newfoundland and Labrador played a vital role in the Battle of the Atlantic. St. John's emerged as one of the Royal Canadian Navy's most critical escort bases.
Newfoundland sent almost 22,000 volunteers off to fight in the Second World War.
What Canada did during that conflict, mobilizing from next to nothing to one of the most powerful militaries in the world that alongside its allies defeated Nazi Germany.
I think without Canada's contribution, I think the war could very well have been lost in the North Atlantic.
While their victory came at a high cost, their stories not forgotten. And their bravery inspiring.
I'm joining the armed forces. I'm heading off to basic training in July.
To a younger generation. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
The anxious wait for word on two missing siblings in Nova Scotia continues 3 days since they disappeared.
There's high tension in the community. I've seen some of the most stoic people I know that are usually show no emotion, very upset about this issue.
6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan likely wandered away from their home in Pictou County on Friday morning. Crews have fanned out on the ground and in the air to search for the siblings. The RCMP says there is no evidence they were kidnapped. Police in Brazil say they foiled an alleged plot to target Lady Gaga's biggest ever concert last night in Rio de Janeiro. 2 suspects were arrested just hours before the event, attended by a record 2 million people. The pair was allegedly planning to detonate explosives and attack the LGBTQ community. The Vatican marked the final day of mourning for Pope Francis today before the conclave begins on Wednesday to choose a successor. 70-year-old Italian Cardinal Pietro Parolin, 67-year-old former Archbishop of Manila Antonio Tagli of the Philippines, and 76-year-old Ghanaian Peter Turkson are tipped as favorites to succeed Pope Francis. A previous Canadian papal favorite and now retired Cardinal Marc Ouellet is still eligible but cannot participate in the conclave because he is now 80 years old. CTV's Kamal Karamali on the other Canadians in the running and what people are looking for in the next leader of the Catholic Church.
Here at the St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto, it's likely the last Sunday Mass before a new pope is selected, and those here pray praying for the best pick.
We hope that they choose the right one.
A lot of factors front of mind for Canadian Catholics, including what the new Pope's relationship will be like with our country, especially with several Canadian cardinals in the conclave. 135 cardinals from roughly 70 countries will meet Wednesday at the Vatican to begin the process of selecting one of them as the new Pope. 4 of them are Canadian, although they're all long shots to be elected as Pope. Their involvement could create deeper ties between Canada and the Vatican.
Canada has never had 4 electors, so it is quite a significant number.
Significant during a time where the Catholic Church is hoping to extend its reach.
Someone who's going to be a pope, not just for those who come to church on a regular basis, very active Catholics, but reaching out beyond that. We need to be a field hospital. The church needs to be reaching out to the periphery.
And that also includes continuing the work of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. That became an integral part of Pope Francis's legacy.
We're in discussions already with, bringing back artifacts from the Vatican and the Vatican Museum, and I think that those discussions need to continue.
For now, Canada's Catholic community watches and waits.
Pope Francis, whose shoes are very big to fill, will he be like him, or will he be a different, have a different vision for the church?
Singing the praise of all candidates, knowing the new Pope's true colors will come to light once his work begins. Kamel Karamali, CTV News, Toronto.
Coming up, reaction to the U.S. president's picture of himself as Pope. Donald Trump's new image making the rounds online. Plus, the young Canadian hacker dominating the AI world. New Brunswick's premier has delivered on an election promise to bump up funding for fertility treatments. It comes as other provinces and the federal government are planning to boost coverage. CTV's Sarah Plowman has the details.
The path to parenthood can be filled with hurdles, like infertility. BC's Laura Spencer and her husband turned to IVF 10 years ago. After 3 years and 2 cycles, it worked. She's grateful and now coaches others along a journey that's emotionally and financially draining.
So yeah, we paid over $20,000 out of pocket. So that's out of reach for most people.
Public funding for fertility treatments has gained momentum. New Brunswick is the latest as its premier made good on a campaign promise to cover a full cycle of in vitro fertilization or intrauterine insemination.
We want to help New Brunswickers make their dream of building a family a reality.
BC's IVF program starts this summer. Saskatchewan has introduced a fertility tax credit, and so has Ontario, where a cycle of treatment is already funded. In the federal election, the Liberals pledged to set up a new IVF program to provide up to $20,000 for a cycle of IVF treatment.
Well, the federal government's commitment is new, so we're going to be learning how that impacts because they've essentially made a similar commitment to ours.
The advocacy group Fertility Matters applauds the promises and announcements, but wants to see alignment between Ottawa and the provinces.
My hope would be supplement what's currently being offered and not to replace the current programs in place so that we can ensure additional access to care.
Across Canada, there's a patchwork approach. 9 provinces offer some public funding or tax credits for fertility treatments. Alberta is the only province that doesn't, but is now exploring the possibility of a tax credit. With Canada's birth rate at an all-time low for the second year in a row, advocates argue fertility funding is not only a health issue, but an economic one.
Looking at ways to support population growth is a really important conversation piece.
Potential support for families wanting to have one. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
Still ahead tonight, Elon Musk's link to the launch of a new American city. The Winnipeg Jets and their fans are flying high tonight after a major playoff comeback win.
He gets it. Leon shoots. They score! Game over! Series over!
Wild wild scenes in Winnipeg as Adam Lowry scored in overtime of Game 7 to eliminate the St. Louis Blues from round 1. It completed a remarkable comeback with the Jets scoring the tying goal in the dying seconds of the third. The Jets will move on to face the Dallas Stars in round 2. SpaceX headquarters in Texas is about to become a new city. Residents in Starbase, who are mostly company employees, voted in favor of the move, much to the delight of owner Elon Musk. The high-tech outpost sits on a narrow patch of land, also home to SpaceX launches. Some nearby residents oppose the idea, accusing the company of harming the local environment. And Trump has posted an AI-generated photo of himself online as a muscular Jedi holding a red lightsaber on this May the 4th, also known as Star Wars Day. It comes a day after Trump posted this image of himself as Pope, prompting this reaction from the Archbishop of New York.
I hope he didn't have anything to do with that.
Are you offended by that?
Well, it wasn't good. Gli italiani dicono un brutta figura.
Still ahead, the future is bright. How this young student is putting his hacking skills to the test. Finally for us tonight, the student from Saskatchewan who could teach us all a thing or two about computers. As CTV's Allison Bamford reports, his time spent building innovative technologies is paying off.
A busy end to Marmik Patel's computer science degree.
It's been really hectic.
When he's not behind his laptop, he's traveling to universities like Harvard, Carnegie Mellon, Berkeley, and MIT to compete in hackathons, an event where students develop new software programs.
A lot of weekends I fly in on Monday or Tuesday. I have to write a midterm, I have to write some assessments, and then Thursday, Friday, I'm leaving. So I'm seeing what the issue is.
Right now, he's debugging one of his recent hackathon projects.
This is running now.
An app extension for Google Maps that doesn't just show the fastest route, but also the safest.
It'll consider things like weather and traffic, and then give you route suggestions based on safety of each route.
The 22-year-old has controlled computers with his brain waves while wearing a headset.
Oh, there we go.
And won first place at one of the largest hackathons in North America for a school shooting detection app he helped create.
It'll automatically send alerts to 911 operators, to anyone in the vicinity, automatically declare lockdown, and all that detection takes place with AI.
There's no question that the tech companies are all looking for ideas like this.
While there's been rapid growth in artificial intelligence, there's still so much room to expand, and experts say it could be beneficial to join in.
I asked the radiologist, will AI replace radiologists? And he said no, but radiologists who make good use of AI will replace radiologists who don't.
So I'm trying to debug.
Patel hopes to make good use of AI beyond his hackathon apps.
Ideas are everywhere. You pick something, you find something that's interesting, and you start building and launching.
And whatever he launches could land him a career in the Silicon Valley. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
That is our newscast for this Sunday night. I'm Heather Butts. Thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.